America does not care about oil because Americans like cheap gasoline. That is too small. It cares because oil is the hidden fuel underneath the modern world. You may not see it when you open your phone. You may not see it when food appears on a supermarket shelf. You may not see it when a package arrives at your door. You may not see it when a plane crosses the sky. But behind all of it, something has moved. A truck, a ship, a tractor, a container crane, a refinery, a fuel pipeline, tanker crossing a narrow sea lane. Oil is not just gasoline. It is motion. It is distance. It is shipping. It is food. It is plastic. It is fertilizer. It is military reach. It is the reason a product made on one continent can appear inside a store on another. And that is why oil is never only an energy question. It is a power question. Because the country that can secure energy can move. The country that can move can trade. The country that can trade can project power. And the country that can protect the flow can shape the rules of the world. This is why America still cares so much about oil, even after fracking, even after electric cars, even after years of saying the future is renewable. Because oil does not only sit in the ground, it moves through roads, ports, ships, tankers, straits, refineries, currencies, alliances, and militaries. When that system works, most people forget it exists. When it breaks, everyone feels it. A war begins far away. A tanker route is threatened. A canal closes. A major producer cuts supply. And suddenly the crisis is not far away anymore. It arrives at the gas station. It arrives in food prices. It arrives in airline tickets. It arrives in shipping costs. It arrives in inflation. It arrives in the cost of ordinary life. So this is not a story about oil. It is a story about how energy became the foundation of American power, military reach, and global order. The modern world often talks as if the economy is weightless. Software, finance, services, clouds, data. But the real world is still heavy. It has to be mined, refined, packed, shipped, cooled, stored, fed, fueled. Oil is inside that weight. It is in the diesel truck that moves food from a farm to a city. It is in the container ship that crosses the ocean. It is in jet fuel. It is in asphalt roads. It is in plastics. It is in medical supplies. It is in fertilizers that help feed modern populations. Oil became more than a fuel. It became an operating system. Before oil, coal had powered industrial civilization. Coal fed factories, railways, steamships, steel. But coal was heavy, dirty, slow to load. It demanded storage, shovels, stokers, and fixed routes. Oil changed the physics of power. It was dense, liquid, portable. It could be pumped into tanks, loaded onto ships, burned inside engines, moved through pipelines, stored in depots, carried across oceans. That made energy mobile. And once energy became mobile, power changed. Armies could move faster. Navies could travel farther. Airplanes could cross continents. Suburbs could spread. Global trade could stretch across oceans. Factories could depend on parts and materials from far away. Oil made distance cheaper. And when distance becomes cheaper, the whole map of life changes. But it also creates a new vulnerability. If modern life depends on movement, then whoever can interrupt movement can shake the system. That is why oil is not only about wells, it is about flow. Who extracts it? Who refines it? Who ships it? Who insures it? Who protects the routes? Who controls the narrow passages? Who can close them? Who can keep them open? That is the oil system. And America did not simply participate in it. It helped build the order around it. America's oil story did not begin in the Middle East. It began at home, in Pennsylvania, in wooden derricks, in mud, in barrels, in the early industrial search for a new fuel. At first, oil was not yet the bloodstream of the world. It was a business, product, a new industrial opportunity, but the logic of oil rewarded scale. It was not enough to drill. Oil had to be refined, stored, transported, sold, integrated with railroads, connected to markets. That is why companies that could control refining and transport became so powerful. Oil was never only a substance, it was a system of infrastructure. Then came scale. Places like Spindletop showed what oil could become when it erupted in enormous quantities. Suddenly, oil was not just lamp fuel. It could power engines, railroads, ships, factories, heat, transport. The United States became an oil giant before it became the global oil policeman. That matters, because in the first half of the 20th century, American power did not rest only on banks, factories, or armies. It rested on energy abundance. Coal had built the first industrial world. But oil made a different world possible, a faster world, a mobile world, a world of vehicles rather than only rails, a world of engines rather than only steam, a world where power could move across space with much greater freedom. This is the first reason America cares about oil, because oil was part of how America became modern, and then part of how America became powerful. Other powers saw the same thing. Britain had built an empire on coal. Its navy depended on coaling stations around the world. Coal was heavy, but Britain had it. Oil was different. Oil gave ships speed, range, acceleration, efficiency. A navy powered by oil could respond faster and travel farther. But Britain did not have enough oil at home. So the choice to move from coal to oil was also a choice to depend on foreign supply. The Persian Gulf became more important. Oil fields far from London became part of imperial strategy. This is the second lesson of oil. Better energy can make a country stronger, but it can also make that country dependent on places it does not control. America faced the same transformation in a different way. The internal combustion engine needed roads. Cars needed highways. Trucks needed fuel stations. Suburbs needed distance to feel normal. After the rise of the automobile, America didn't only consume oil, it redesigned itself around oil. Homes moved farther from work. Shopping centers spread along roads. Trucks became central to supply chains. Airports connected cities. A country built around motion became a country built around fuel. Oil did not just power American cars, it shaped American geography. Once that geography existed, oil was no longer optional. It was embedded into daily life. That is why energy transitions are so hard. You are not only changing the fuel, you are changing the world built around the fuel. Oil became unavoidable in war. In the First World War, motor vehicles began to show what fuel could do to military movement. Taxis carrying soldiers to the front became an image of a new age. War was no longer only railways, horses, and marching men. It was engines, trucks, aircraft, fuel depots, supply columns. By the Second World War, this logic had become brutal. A modern military could have courage, strategy, factories, soldiers, weapons. But if it did not have fuel, it could not move. Japan understood this. Japan's military machine needed oil, but Japan lacked secure domestic supplies. When the United States imposed an oil embargo in 1941, it created a strategic crisis for Tokyo. Japan's leaders did not attack Pearl Harbor simply because of one emotion or one ideology. They were trying to secure their flank while moving toward oil resources in Southeast Asia. Oil shaped the decision space. At Pearl Harbor, the battleships are remembered. But fuel tanks mattered too. A navy without fuel cannot project power. Ships become metal sitting in water. Planes stay on the ground. Logistics becomes destiny. For the Allies, America's oil abundance was a decisive advantage. The United States could produce, refine, and ship the fuel that modern war demanded. The war was fought by soldiers, but it was also fought by tankers, refineries, pipelines, depots, and convoys. Oil did not replace strategy. It made strategy possible. The battlefield often reveals the system more clearly than peace does. In North Africa, Rommel's forces pushed toward Egypt and the Middle East. The prize was not only land, it was also access, routes, supply, oil. But tanks in the desert are hungry machines. They need fuel constantly. When fuel did not arrive, momentum disappeared. A brilliant advance could become a stalled line of vehicles under the sun. The same lesson appeared on the other side of the war. In 1944, Patton's army moved with extraordinary speed across France. But speed created its own problem. The faster the army moved, the more fuel it needed. At a certain point, the vehicles could go no farther. Not because the soldiers had lost courage, not because the tanks had lost power, but because the fuel had not caught up. Modern war is not only about the front line, it is about the line behind the line. The fuel trucks, the depots, the railheads, the ports, the refinery. Germany and Japan both tried to compensate for weak access to oil, synthetic fuel, alternative sources, emergency production. But scale was the problem. Machines of war consumed fuel faster than substitutes could replace it. When Allied bombing hit German synthetic fuel plants, it attacked the nervous system of mechanized warfare. Planes could not fly. Tanks could not move. Armies slowed. This is why some historians describe the Second World War as an oil war inside a war. The battles were visible. The fuel system was underneath. After the war, America stood in a unique position. It had industry, it had military power, it had capital, and it had oil. For a time, the United States was not only a consumer of energy, it was the great producer. That gave it enormous power. But abundance does not last forever. As American cars multiplied, suburbs expanded, factories grew, and global commitments widened, demand rose. By the 1960s and early 1970s, the United States was importing more oil. The old sense of energy independence began to fade. This changed the meaning of the Middle East. American interest in Saudi Arabia did not emerge from one simple motive. It came from a larger strategic pattern: security, oil access, regional stability, military reach, alliances. The 1945 meeting between Franklin Roosevelt and King Ibn Saud symbolized the beginning of a relationship that would shape decades. The United States needed reliable access to energy. Saudi Arabia needed security and investment. Oil companies needed production. States needed revenue. Over time, producing countries gained more power. They were no longer only territories where foreign companies extracted resources. They became political actors in the global oil system. OPEC was part of that shift. Oil-producing countries organized. They wanted greater influence over price, production, and control. This was a turning point. The age when Western companies could dominate oil without serious pushback was ending. The producers had learned that oil was not just a resource, it was leverage. The 1973 oil embargo made that leverage visible. For Americans, the crisis did not appear first as theory. It appeared as gas lines, rationing, price signs, empty pumps, frustrated drivers. The price of oil rose dramatically. Cheap energy no longer felt guaranteed. This was not just an oil crisis. It was a psychological rupture. A country built around cars, highways, suburbs, and cheap fuel suddenly saw its vulnerability. Oil moved into inflation. It moved into food. It moved into manufacturing. It moved into politics. It moved into the household budget. A distant conflict had entered American daily life. After the oil shocks of the 1970s, energy security became permanent. The United States could not treat Gulf oil as a normal commodity anymore. It became a strategic concern. The Carter Doctrine made that clear. The Persian Gulf was not simply another region on the map. The free flow of oil from the Gulf was treated as a vital interest. This does not mean every American action in the Middle East can be reduced to oil. History is more complicated than that. There were alliances, wars, ideology, Cold War logic, regional politics, terrorism, domestic pressure. But oil was always in the room, sometimes openly, sometimes quietly, because the global economy depended on the flow, and America had taken on the role of protecting much of that flow. To understand oil power, look at the map, not only at oil fields, at choke points. The Strait of Hormuz is a narrow gate between the Persian Gulf and the wider ocean. A large share of the world's oil passes through it. So does a significant share of liquefied natural gas. This makes Hormuz one of the most sensitive places on Earth. A small strip of water carries consequences for factories, power plants, shipping companies, and households far away. Then there is Malacca, a crowded artery between the Indian Ocean and the Pacific. For Asia, it is one of the great energy passages. Oil moving toward China, Japan, South Korea, and Southeast Asia must pass through narrow geography. And there is Suez, a canal that turns distance into savings. When the Ever Given blocked the Suez Canal in 2021, the world received a simple lesson. Global trade can be enormous and fragile at the same time. One ship, one passage, billions of dollars in delayed trade. If Suez closes, ships can go around the Cape of Good Hope, but that takes time, fuel, money, insurance, capacity. Every detour becomes a price. This is how geography becomes economics, and economics becomes politics. America cares about oil because oil is not only underground, it is trapped inside roots. The modern oil system is not protected only by ownership. It is protected by movement. A tanker must leave port. A pipeline must keep pumping. A canal must stay open. A strait must remain passable. An insurer must be willing to cover the voyage. A navy may need to patrol the route. This is why the Red Sea matters, why Bab el-Mandeb matters, why Hormuz matters, why Malacca matters, why the Suez Canal matters, and why a country can be powerful not only by owning oil, but by securing the sea lanes through which oil travels. Pipeline bypasses can help. Saudi Arabia and the UAE have routes that can move some oil around Hormuz. But pipelines have limits. They cannot magically replace all maritime flow. And liquefied natural gas is even harder to reroute. So the system remains exposed. This exposure creates a market for fear. Insurance rates rise. Shipping companies reroute. Consumers pay more. Governments respond. Navies deploy. Oil is often described as a commodity, but it behaves like a strategic bloodstream. If the flow is threatened, the body reacts. This is the third reason America cares. The United States is not only thinking about American gasoline, it is thinking about the stability of a global economic system that depends on energy moving through vulnerable places. Then oil became tied to money. In 1971, the United States ended the dollar's convertibility into gold. The world had to adjust to a new monetary order. At the same time, oil-producing states were receiving enormous revenues from higher oil prices. They needed somewhere to place that money. The United States needed confidence in the dollar. This is the background to what people often call the Petrodollar system. But it has to be explained carefully. It was not a simple secret button that made America powerful overnight. And it was not just a conspiracy where oil magically forced the world to obey Washington. The reality was more structural. Oil was largely priced in dollars. Oil exporters accumulated huge dollar revenues. Those revenues needed safe, liquid places to go. US Treasury markets provided depth, liquidity, and security. So oil money moved into American financial assets. This helped support the dollar's global role. It also deepened the relationship between Gulf oil, American finance, and American power. The important point is not that oil pricing alone sustains the dollar. That is too simple. The real point is that oil, finance, security, and trust became linked. A barrel of oil was no longer just energy. It was part of a monetary order. Security and oil became intertwined. The United States sold weapons, maintained bases, patrolled sea lanes, built partnerships with Gulf states, protected shipping, and in return, The broader system of oil flow remained connected to American power. Again, this should not be reduced to a cartoon. It was not simply, America wants oil, therefore every action is about oil. Real policy has many layers, but oil created the background condition. The flow had to continue. Prices had to remain manageable, allies had to be supplied, rivals had to be contained, markets had to trust the routes. Even American energy independence has limits. The United States can produce enormous amounts of oil. But oil is priced in a global market. A major disruption in the Middle East can raise prices everywhere. A barrel lost from global supply affects the global price. That means American consumers can still feel shocks even when American production is high. Domestic production gives security. It gives leverage. It reduces dependence. But it does not create full price immunity. This is why America still watches the Gulf, why it watches OPEC, why it watches tanker routes, why it watches choke points, because the question is not only whether America has oil, the question is what happens to the global price when the system shakes. Oil is also deeper inside modern life than most people realize. It is in agriculture, diesel tractors, irrigation pumps, shipping, refrigeration, fertilizer supply chains. Food today is not only grown, it is moved, processed, packed, cooled, delivered. All of that depends on energy. Oil is also in petrochemicals, plastics, medical packaging, synthetic fibers, industrial materials, everyday objects that do not look like oil at all. This is why energy transition is complicated. Even if cars become electric, oil does not vanish from civilization overnight. Transportation is only one part of the system. Shipping remains difficult. Aviation remains difficult. Petrochemicals remain difficult. Heavy machinery remains difficult. Fertilizer and industrial inputs remain deeply connected to fossil fuel systems. And modern supply chains are not built for long interruptions. They are built for movement, continuous movement, just-in-time movement. A ship delayed in one place becomes an empty shelf somewhere else. A fuel price spike becomes a shipping cost spike. A shipping cost spike becomes a consumer price spike. The oil shock moves through the system like a signal. By the time it reaches the household, it no longer looks like geopolitics. It looks like the cost of living. The oil system is changing. China is now one of the great energy consumers of the world. Its factories, ports, cities, and supply chains depend on imported energy flowing through maritime routes. That makes choke points like Malacca strategically important. A rising power that depends on imported oil must think about sea lanes, about naval reach, about suppliers, about currencies, about alternatives. This is where dollar debates return. Some oil trade may move into other currencies. China and Gulf producers have discussed deeper financial links. The yuan may play a larger role in some transactions, but the dollar system does not disappear simply because one deal changes currency. The dollar's power rests on more than oil. It rests on deep markets, trust, liquidity, military power, financial infrastructure. Still, the pressure is real. A world trying to move away from American financial dominance will look at oil because oil sits at the center of trade. Meanwhile, OPEC still matters. Large reserves give producers leverage. Saudi Arabia matters because output decisions can influence supply expectations and price. But even Saudi Arabia does not simply control oil prices like a switch. Prices emerge from supply, demand, spare capacity, fear, storage, conflict, and market psychology. The oil order is powerful because it is complex. No single actor fully controls it, but many actors can disturb it. Electric vehicles will change oil demand. Renewables will change power systems. Batteries will change storage. This transition is real, but it does not erase the oil system overnight. Oil is embedded in transport, shipping, aviation, agriculture, petrochemicals, military logistics, global trade. and the infrastructure of modern life. That is why America still cares, not because the future cannot change, but because the present is still built on oil. America cares because oil prices affect inflation, because allies depend on energy flow, because rivals depend on the same choke points, because the dollar system has been tied to global energy trade, because the US Navy helps secure routes that carry fuel and commerce, because a disruption in one narrow passage can send shockwaves through the world economy. Oil is not just a resource, it is a map, a military problem, a shipping problem, a financial problem, a food problem, a materials problem, a political problem. The modern world likes to imagine itself as clean, digital, and weightless. But underneath it runs a black thread. Through pipelines, through tankers, through ports, through refineries, through fertilizers, through plastics, through fleets, through currencies, through alliances, and through the everyday price of life. That is why America cares so much about oil. Not because oil is the future forever, but because the world has not yet escaped the system oil built